Hello people, my name is Shami Siddiqui. Welcome to Basics of Programming number 2 and this is part of the Computer 01 tutorial series for Basics of Programming like I said. So in this video today we're going to be talking about the types of programming languages um, and we're going to be talking about four types in general. Um, and these programming types make up the bulk of most of the programming languages, or most of the popular programming languages at least, that are present in, well, the modern day world. Let's begin. Let's start off with a recap of what we learned last episode on the basics of programming. Programming languages are basically the medium in which programs or applications are written in. Programming itself is just formulating a program so it can be executed. And programming works in a way that it contacts a compiler which executes it to the computer. Now, remember this is just a recap, a basic summary. If you are still confused by any of these topics, be sure to message me, okay? Be sure to message me at gamerrevolt@gmail.com. I will be happy to answer any of your programming concerns, or just put it down in the comments below. So again, you can have a more detailed review of this in the first episode. So let's go. Now, there are types of programming languages. Yeah, they are. Surprisingly, I know. I was confused at first as well. I mean, like, the programming languages. Now there are types, and there are many types of programming languages, and they each have their own standards. Um, an example of this would be low-level and high-level programming languages. Now we'll be discussing them in this episode, but you can tell that low-level programming languages will have lower standards, and high-level programming languages will have higher standards. And again, well, in this episode, we'll only be covering some of the programming languages, as listing them all would be tiring. There are like 50 or 40 different types of programming languages, so I'm just listing the basics and the main ones. Let's start off with low-level programming languages. Now, low-level programming languages are basically programming languages that offer little or no difference from the actual computer's instruction set or instructions on how to run. Now they differ. They don't. There's no big difference. They contact the computer directly, and there are like I think it said down there. There are really any integer types, any of the classic terms they see in any conventional programming languages. Now these programming languages include machine code and assembly, and as we learned, that the compiler turns in most programming languages, the compiler turns the programming language, whatever you wrote, into machine code assembly. So basically, essentially what the compiler does is it takes the high level or low or middle level programming languages, and it turns it into low level programming languages so it can contact the computer. And again, these are the main low level programming languages that are used today. There are more, but they aren't used that often. Now, middle level programming languages. Now, these programming languages are like the dividing barrier between low level and high level programming languages. They're sort of in the middle, and no, they aren't. The programming languages listed below, such as C, Fortran, and Basic, aren't usually called middle level programming languages, but in reality they are, because they don't have the features that you would find in a lot of high level programming languages, such as C++. So these are mainly the kind of middle. They're in the middle between low and high. They're not as bad. They're not as assembly low level programming languages are not bad. They're just, what do you call it? They're sort of the kind of programming languages that don't have a lot of features in them, and they're not as low as them, and they're not as high or superior as the high level programming languages. So again, middle level programming languages include C, Fortran, and Basic. Now, high-level programming languages. Now, these programming languages are basically the type of programming languages that push the computer to the limits. They use all of the available things that you can do with the computer, and they each have their own variable names. They have their own functions built into them, and these are what you call high-level programming languages, and they use all the computer's constraints abilities. And these this is mainly the type of programming languages that you guys will probably be working with if you decide to become a programmer, because Java, Python. These are all written. These are all high-level programming languages because they have they use the computer to its highest abilities, and they push it to the limit, and they use basically every constraint that is there for the computer. And again, C++, Java, Python. Now, an interesting thing is, why is C++ a high-level programming language while C is considered a middle level? Now, that's mainly because C++, when it first came out in 1973, I think, it was made by a guy named Bjorn Starstrup or something like that. Starstrup, I may be wrong about that. But when it came out, it wasn't originally its own programming language. It was actually an addition to C, which was called C with classes. And as time went on, it became its own programming language. So again, C++ originally was not its own programming language. It was an addition to it. And this addition turned it into a high-level programming language because it introduced the idea of classes and stuff like that. So it now uses the computer to its highest capabilities. If that sort of makes sense. I'm not really good at explaining things. Object-oriented programming languages. Now, I want to tell you that high-level, middle-level, and low-level programming languages are the three main types. You will find every programming language somewhere within those programming types. Every other type is sort of a subset of the high-level, low-level, or middle-level programming languages. And that applies for object-oriented programming languages, or otherwise called OOP languages, or otherwise known as object-oriented OOP. Yeah, okay, good. So basically, all the programming languages that use objects as a way to describe the various parts of the language, like this is a tree. That's an object. That's an object, and that's how they use it. This tree is an object, and within this object, you run this specific thing. That's how object-oriented programming languages work. And object-oriented programming languages include Java, C++, and Ruby. And an interesting fact is that the first object-oriented programming language was called Stimula. So that's something cool, just to remember. Now, conclusion. These are the main types of programming languages. Well, three main types of programming languages and one subset. They make the bulk of most of the programming languages in the world. Well, not most, the most of the most popular. And again, this wraps up today's episode of Basics of Programming. In the next episode, you will be learning about the history of programming and who were the pioneers of programming. So, this now, I just want to mention something here. Most people will probably skip the next episode, but I highly recommend you guys just look at the history, because when you look at the history, you get a better understanding of how the programming language was made, and it just helps overall. So I recommend you guys watch the next episode of the history part, but if you don't want to, get it's completely optional. And well, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this series, The Basics of Programming, be sure to leave a like and comment below any questions you have, and I will see you all later.